Hi, everybody, and welcome. Today, I have a fantastic conversation with you. We are talking nutrition and your bones, a food-first approach. As you know, I'm no nonsense. I like a practical discussion about what really matters. So today, we're going to talk about foods that might decrease your fracture risk. We'll talk about how much protein do you really need? And what is one of the key factors in bone health nutrition around which all the other factors circle? You may not know this one. It's very important. And then we'll talk also about what foods might be harming you. And at the end, the very popular myth versus fact section, so you can sort through the noise and know what the truth is. Hi, I'm Dr. Lisa. I'm a physical therapist and a specialist in osteoporosis and bone health exercise, and the founder of Brick House Bones, online support and education for your bone health journey, so you can keep living confidently, doing the things you love with the people you love. Today, my special guest is Adrienne Bitar. Adrienne is a lecturer in food studies at Cornell University and the co-founder and co-CEO of Scene Nutrition. This is a food tech startup that formulated the first calcium chew made from only real foods for better bone health. She serves as corporate advisor to the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation and is on the medical advisory committee for the National Menopause Foundation. Adrienne Bitar earned her BA from UC Berkeley, a PhD from Stanford University, and completed fellowship at the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University. It's so beautiful there. And I want to say Scene Nutrition has generously agreed to sponsor this video to be ad-free for all of you. This is an educational video that will be ad-free. So if you're interested in what Scene Nutrition has to offer, go to scenenutrition.com. SEEN nutrition.com. Adrienne, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lisa, for having us. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I always appreciate talking to you because you can really sort through the confusion. You know, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation. And to me, I just want practical advice on how can we eat to support our bones? What does that really mean? What does nutrition for bone health look like? And what does that mean in the big picture of our bones?
Yeah, it requires a real reconceptualization of the services that our skeletons provide. Too often, I think the popular imagination of our skeletons is just a static element. It provides foundation, support, structure for our body, but it's not an active participant in promoting health. And that could not be farther from the truth. Our bones are what scientists call a functional reserve. They're a functional reserve of nutrients. So think of it as like a storage unit or a bank or whatever analogy is helpful, but they store calcium, magnesium, other nutrients that if we aren't eating it from our daily diet, our bodies will pull those nutrients from our bones. Fun fact, our skeletons store 2.6 pounds of calcium in its frame alone. So this is a really critical part of our calcium. And if we're not eating it in our diet, if we're not eating these nutrients in our diet, our bones will serve as a storage unit for those.
Wow, so it's kind of like a savings account. And if you're running low in your bills, if you're not getting calories, your body's going to take it from the savings account, right?
That's right.
Constantly remodeling, constantly rebuilding, and metabolically active tissue. That's right. It's not static. So, all right. So let's dive right in. What is one of the first things that the research tells us can be impactful in our nutrition?
Keeping a close eye on our nutrition is really important for bone health, because if we're not getting those nutrients from our diet, it has to come from somewhere, and that often comes from our bones. So one of the takeaways I've gotten from recent literature is that calcium first, protein second, exercise always. So there's been a lot of recent studies on the importance of protein, for example, given that calcium intake is adequate.
Protein. The recommendations recently changed in the U.S. for how much protein we need. Really, what is the role of that as far as nutritionally? What does that impact on our bone? How much do we really need? And does it make a difference in the overall picture of bone density and fracture risk?
Yeah, it's very much in the news recently when the guidelines changed from that 0.8 grams per kilogram guideline to now a much higher range, which is 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram. That's quite a big change, but thankfully this isn't just a new finding. We've seen in multiple studies, review studies, consensus reports, that there's been an interest and an inclination that protein intakes that exceed the RDA, which at the time was 0.8 grams per kilogram, would be beneficial for bone health. And we've seen this from multiple studies, which I'm happy to link here, that the takeaway is that higher protein intake is associated with significantly lower risk of major osteoporotic fracture.
Yeah. So one of the things I share in my workshop, Journey to Fracture Proof, is how bone is 1/3 protein by mass and 1/2 by volume. I mean, that's a lot. And protein is the structure, this collagen structure, which the minerals attach to that give bone its strength and flexibility. So I like visuals and unique pictures for this too. So think about when people are pouring concrete, they do rebar first. Rebar gives that concrete structure its strength and flexibility. And the concrete, now these are the calcium and the elements that adhere, the minerals that adhere to give it its hardness. So we need protein for that rebar structure in our bones, strength and flexibility.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And I think when you're looking at the populations who perhaps suffer from that struggle to get enough protein in their diet, there's a really tidy overlap between, for example, women over 60 who struggle to get enough protein in their diet and those that are most likely to be affected by osteoporosis, so postmenopausal women. So I think that's why the nutritional emphasis on protein can be really beneficial for this particular osteoporosis community.
Right. So as we're postmenopausal, we know that bone density is significantly impacted. We also know that there's a strong correlation of association between sarcopenia, losing muscle mass, also kind of affected by protein intake in the diet, and low bone density. The inverse is also true, right? If we have enough muscle mass, we have association of higher bone mineral density. Wow. So protein, like you're listing protein pretty high in the hierarchy of nutritional strategies for bone health.
Yes, they found that if calcium intake is adequate, higher protein intake contributes to lower fracture risk in older adults. And that's a consensus statement that was issued even before the RDA changed in the United States. And it's not a huge difference. They found that an increase from 0.8 to maybe 0.9 or 1 gram a day can really make a big impact on fracture risk in older adults.
Okay, elaborate on what you just said, though, which is when calcium intake is adequate. So protein in and of itself may not be enough to really have the impact we want it to if calcium isn't present in enough quantities in our diet.
Yes. And that's something that's been really well understood in the scientific literature for decades, like way predating the current interest in protein, that if you have vitamin D replete individuals, if you have diets that are adequate in calcium, which for for the most of the people we talk to is 1,200 milligrams a day, so about 4 cups of milk, 4 servings of dairy, then higher intakes of protein can be beneficial for bone health. But without that first step of if calcium intakes are adequate, then the protein doesn't really seem to make much of a difference at all.
Okay, so what does that play in the role of fractures? Do we know?
Yeah, so observational studies have done a good job of correlating, but what I've been most interested and most compelled by are interventional studies. So that's when you have large groups of individuals and you have one group controlled for their diet and another group with a higher calcium and a higher protein intake. So you'll see these large studies with thousands of individuals participating. Like the one I feel most compelled by was followed a group of 7,200 Australian adults that lived in residential care facilities. So granted, it was in residential care, which is not the same as living out in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
But the intervention was that they gave half of those older adults with a mean age of 86 an extra 1.5 servings of dairy a day. So that's protein, that's calcium. What that did is it brought that group of people in line with the recommended amounts. So those people were getting about 1,200 milligrams of calcium and adequate intake of protein. Over the course of 2 years, this was 7,200 older adults. They found that hip fracture risk was reduced by 43%, and that falls, I thought this would be interesting for your community, fall risk was actually reduced by 11%. So that's that's a huge burden taken off the healthcare system. That's a huge improvement in quality of life. And it's really the result of just a little bit of extra protein and, not a significant amount of calcium, 500 milligrams, but that's just an extra 1.5 servings a day. So
what did they gather from this? What was the change as a result of this nutrition? Was it strength? Was it muscle? What did we take from this?
Well, it's both, and it's also avoiding malnutrition. So strength, you mentioned muscle. If you look at those 2 years, which are really critical years, so we're talking about mid 80s, late 80s, and avoiding weight loss is really critical during that stage of your life. They found the control group, which was eating inadequate calcium and inadequate protein, lost considerable amount of weight. Like it was about kilo or so, 1.1 kilograms over the course of 2 years. But the intervention group that was getting the extra 1.5 servings of dairy did not lose any weight. When they took a deeper dive into what kind of weight they were able to maintain, it was muscle mass in the arms and legs, which, as I'm sure you're extremely well aware, really helps with mobility, really helps with balance. So preserving that muscle mass in older adulthood is such a critical part into avoiding falls and avoiding fractures, being able to have that balance, have that strength in your arms and legs. So that is what the researchers hypothesized contributed to the reduction in fracture risk and contributed to the reduction in falls.
So really, this is directly impacting frailty. Frailty that we know is a known risk for increasing fractures in older adults. And we can extrapolate this. If we start this earlier, before we even end up in a residential care facility, if we can maintain that muscle mass and strength and bone quality ahead of time using these strategies.
Exactly.
Boy, that can make a big difference. So it is the combination of adequate calcium and adequate protein.
Exactly. Right? So
protein alone without the calcium is not enough.
No.
I think that's important because people are always looking for the one thing, and it's really how we put it all together, right? How it works together in this symphony of physiology that we are, right?
Yes.
I love that. So are you aware, does it matter? Does the type of dairy that they're using matter? If some people are trying to be more heart healthy, is low fat also a reasonable option, or fermented forms or hard cheeses? Are those reasonable options too?
Yeah, I think all of the above are totally reasonable. One of the reasons why public health nutritionists are so interested in dairy supplementation is because it's accessible and because it'll be easy to adhere to. So if it's your palate, if you prefer Parmesan over Gouda or cheddar over cheddar jack, that's whatever you're more likely to adhere to is the best solution. The general public health guidelines is that for healthy adults with a varied diet, it might be a prudent choice to choose low-fat or skim options for fluid milk, for example. And those options do tend to have a little bit more protein and a little bit more calcium, not a significant amount. But by reducing the saturated fat, that can contribute to other health benefits while allowing you to consume adequate amounts of dairy to get you to that 1,200 milligram mark.
Yeah, that's great advice. It's good to know people have options, but you're right. It's what will you do that really matters, because people, if they just eliminate that choice in the first place, are going to be missing out. I appreciate that because I like to use fermented. I like yogurts and things to get that combination of probiotics and dairy. But I like your calcium chews because the fat's been removed, most of the lactose has been removed. It's just easy for me. And like you say, that make it easy so people can get what they need. And that's what I appreciate about it. All right. So lifestyle factors. Is there something we can do earlier in life? Do we have a lot of data to help tell us, can lifestyle factors influence this early? And when is it even too early to ever start thinking about our bone health?
That's a good question. One of my favorite sort of overviews of the answer to that question was by Dr. Connie Weaver, and she and her colleagues made the claim that between 20 to 40% of your bone mineral density, of your general bone health, is influenced by lifestyle factors. So
20 to 40%. Wow.
Yeah. So yes, osteoporosis is like like many other chronic conditions. It's influenced by genetics, it's influenced by lifestyle, it's influenced by diet, and so on. But understanding that between 20 and 40% can be influenced by your lifestyle is actually it's a real note of optimism that it's never too early and it's never too late to change your lifestyle to improve your bone health. In that review study, she and her colleagues ranked 19 lifestyle factors and graded them according to the letter grade. And she ranked calcium and exercise as with the A letter grade. There were some runners up, dairy, protein, and so on. But understanding that all the lifestyle factors that you can modify, exercise is a no-brainer. Like, we know that exercise is incredibly important for bone health, as early or as late or as whenever you can start today. And then also ensuring that calcium intakes are adequate throughout those critical bone building years, like childhood, adolescence, early adulthood, but also throughout the life, because as we mentioned earlier, your body needs that calcium every day. So it's never too late to just ensure that you have a calcium-rich diet.
Okay. I'm going to repeat this because I think this is one of the key components of this conversation. When they looked at grading the most important lifestyle factors that you can do to take control of your bone health, calcium intake gets an A and exercise gets an A. If you can only choose two things to make the biggest impact, to be the most practical for you, calcium and exercise. And we know exercise at all life stages is incredibly beneficial. It can improve balance, it can improve mood, it can improve sleep, it improves bone density, reduces your risk of falls. It's all the things involved with that. So many benefits. Calcium and exercise, top two.
Yes.
I love that. Let's keep it simple and actionable for people. All right. Are there other non-dairy resources for calcium?
Yes, there are. I think a lot of the research is just focused on dairy because it's such a critical part of our diet, and it's such like an efficient way of delivering that double hit of protein and calcium combined. But if there are reasons why someone's following a non-dairy diet, there's plenty of options for them. So one thing that we get asked out about a lot is plant-based source of calcium. We often recommend chia seeds. Chia seeds or basil seeds are excellent sources of both protein, calcium, and fiber. Some mineral waters have quite a bit of calcium in them, and they're widely available and they're calorie-free. So that's a helpful tip. And there are plant-based sources of calcium. You just have to be very methodical and track it, because it tends to have a lot less calcium than dairy and dairy sources, and the absorption may not be as great. So we say chia seeds, basil seeds, mineral waters, all great sources of calcium.
Yeah, I love this because they're very concentrated, the chia seeds and basil seeds. They can go in a smoothie, they can go in your yogurt. They're pretty easy, like yogurt, calcium and calcium. But they're pretty handy and easy to do. I have one client that told me she puts her basil seeds, she just kind of puts a spoonful, stirs it in water, and drinks it down.
There's a lot of traditional drinks actually that suspend the basil seeds in water, and then you just, Oh, and then there's, if you're non-dairy but you're not vegetarian, fish. Like salmon with the bones in it, canned salmon, sardines are a great source of calcium because you're actually just eating the bones. So it's a good source of calcium.
Yeah, great tip. And I love the mineral water idea too, because if people are just looking for the simplest way to get it very naturally, mineral water, just check the label, read the content. Some mineral waters have more than others, but that's just so simple, a simple way to supplement with your diet. Are there a couple of foods? Are there foods that some of the research tells us may be helpful to bone density?
Yeah, this is a fun and emerging growing body of research. I'll also defer to the work of Dr. Connie Weaver, who's out of San Diego State University, who's done some really inventive work on a couple of different foods. So the first food, is prunes. There's been a pretty good study showing that when you randomize women to 2 to 3 groups, that 50 grams of prunes a day can actually stem bone loss. So 50 grams is like 4 to 5 prunes a day. It's a good source of fiber. And that 50-gram dose helped them maintain their bone mineral density after 1 year, whereas the control group lost 1.1%. So that is a win. I know you like to say that, Dr. Lisa, too, but like no loss is a total win. Like, what a victory. So eating regularly consuming prunes every day was helpful. And in a similar vein, blueberries. Dr. Connie Weaver also did a study.
I love blueberries.
Yes. The caveat here is there's quite a few blueberries.
Oh.
So polyphenol-rich fruits like blueberries may have a similar effect as prunes. So 3/4 a cup of blueberries a day seem to stem bone loss just as much as a higher serving. So that's, if you can, it's a good part of your diet. And for all of these foods, you have to think about the risk-reward ratio. Like, sure, the prune study, like many of these studies, can be industry funded, so take that with a grain of salt. But if you enjoy prunes, they're overall healthful foods, and that's a good study that showed that it can stem bone loss. So blueberries, prunes, mineral water, chia seeds, prunes, all great for bone health.
Yeah, and I agree that. And I would far prefer people get it from whole food sources. And everyone's always trying to tease out, well, what's the one thing in prunes that does it? But I think that's a mistake to take it out of the whole food and all the benefits of that whole food that we're receiving it.
Yes.
Yeah. Magnesium doesn't get as much attention as calcium. Can you explain the role of magnesium? And are there some good food first ways to get enough magnesium in our diet?
Yeah, magnesium has been shown to really help with calcium absorption, and it contributes to something that you mentioned just a few minutes ago, which is like the food matrix effect, which is that it's really hard to tease out, like, okay, this is giving me X, and this is giving me Y, and this is giving me Z, and if I just sort of isolate it all and put it into a potpourri of supplements, and then I can kind of concoct, it's like we need to understand that there's ratios of minerals in foods that we know contribute to general health, bone health, etc. And, sitting here in 2026, medical research is good, but it's not as precise as we sometimes hope. So for magnesium in particular, we know that magnesium is really helpful in helping with calcium absorption. We see that effect with dairy calcium. So that's why, for example, in our chew, we're not isolating out just the calcium from milk. We're keeping intact the whole milk mineral complex. So that includes calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, zinc, copper, iron. And magnesium is a really important part of that because we know that the mineral complex of milk is good for bone health generally, and that also most Americans are deficient in magnesium. So that is we understand that keeping that complex intact and whole and not fiddling with it is good for general health. And the calcium magnesium ratio in milk is helpful for bone health.
Yeah. Any foods you prefer for that?
Dairy has a good source of magnesium, but if you're looking for something that's very magnesium rich, pumpkin seeds are a great source. Legumes, whole grains, certain kinds of legumes, like I think navy beans, but pumpkin seeds is our go-to for magnesium.
That's quick and easy. I love those too. Yeah, super easy. Thank you. And I know we had a great discussion about supplements in your bones with Dr. Hahn too, which is really wonderful for like filling gaps if you need to. But always I like this food first approach that we're having today. We know in research that chronic inflammation is a contributor to bone density and bone quality. For example, we know diabetes, like uncontrolled diabetes and type 2 diabetes people can have higher fracture risk because it affects the microarchitecture. What might be some simple choices that people can make to help support an anti-inflammatory diet with an effort to help improve their bone quality?
That's a great question. And I know Dr. Jocelyn Whitstein has written I would definitely refer people in your community to her book and her work, because she's done great work on the anti-inflammatory diet and bone health. But there's been studies that show that diets low on the dietary inflammatory index are helpful in preventing future fracture risk in premenopausal women. Those foods are your whole unprocessed foods, avoiding red meats, high in fiber. Fiber is a really key part of this. Nearly all Americans are deficient in fiber, and embracing those anti-inflammatory foods. So it's really more about what you're not eating than what you are eating. So you're not eating, for lack of a more polite term, junk food, these ultra-processed foods that are rich in that trinity of salt, sugar, and fat, the saturated fats found in red meats. Those all can contribute to inflammation.
Yeah, I like to say your food should look like its original form as much as possible. Your broccoli should look like broccoli, not a processed broccoli patty. Yeah, as much as you can, that you have whole food so that it looks like it came from the farm. A variety and colors and diversities of plant foods, and like you said, beans and legumes, things that really promote a healthy gut microbiome. And like you say, low on the junk food, processed, fried, high sugar, high salt. That really can play a powerful role. And berries. Dr. Wittstein talked about this too, how wonderful berries can be. To me, that's one of my favorite snacks. It's just wonderful to think it's also really good for me.
Yeah, and there are spices as well. I know she's ginger, especially turmeric. There are some spices. It's not just about, I know a lot of people are like, how can I possibly eat this many foods? Like 3/4 cups of blueberries and prunes and 4 servings of dairy. It's just too much. But it's also foods that you might not think of, like having a turmeric flavoring in your natural diet and regular diet, or some teas or broths, all can really contribute to that anti-inflammatory diet.
I love that. So true. So true. Okay, let's pivot. That was really a great breakdown on things we can eat, but what are some things that we should avoid? We'll start with number one. People ask about this in the group. Sodium.
Sodium is a big one. So we know that sodium and calcium can compete with one another, and that high salt diets usually result in a higher urinary calcium output. So the general rule of thumb is just sticking to the RDA for sodium, which is 2,300 milligrams per day. The average American, however, gets about 3,300 milligrams per day. So we know that we as a group, and this is true across the Western diet for those of your audience members who are not in the US, that we get probably more sodium than we should. That is concerning for reasons about calcium absorption. The good news, though, is that when people look around their pantry to eliminate sodium, usually the most obvious culprit is the salt shaker. But if you actually look at about where the sources of sodium are coming from the American diet or the Western diet, it's not the salt shaker that you have on your dining room table. It's those ultra-processed foods we just talked about, which that's your hidden sources of sodium, like your canned soups, your broths, your sauces like ketchup, barbecue sauces have a lot of sodium in them. So if you're trying to reduce your sodium intake, look first at those ultra-processed foods, which, it's more bang for your buck. If you eliminate those, you're also eliminating some of those other, nutrients of bone health concern. So that would be our first step to eliminating that sodium.
Yeah. So higher sodium diets increase calcium output in the urine, meaning essentially that the calcium you may be getting in your diet is sort of passing right through. And if you're not getting adequate, your body will borrow it from your bone bank of calcium in the savings account.
Yep.
Right. So monitoring our sodium and being conscious of, really the simple solution is to look at those highly processed foods. Where can we make some small adjustments to decrease the salt in our diet every day? Right. Great. Alcohol. Does alcohol impact bone health?
So the research is a bit mixed on alcohol, but there is some things that it's not mixed about. So some common sense things, which is that any amount of alcohol can compromise your balance. It kind of, you have to think it through, but it's really intuitive that it can it does raise your risk of falls. And that even a small amount of alcohol can compromise your balance and raise the risk. So although the research doesn't, weigh in so heavily about what exact amount of alcohol crosses that threshold, I think we should be really aware of what alcohol is doing in our body. And that excessive amounts of alcohol definitely have been shown to be detrimental for bone health. So I would, my personal take on it is I keep it to special celebrations, and I'm very aware of my alcohol intake. But yeah, that's the general consensus is excessive alcohol isn't good for any part of your health, definitely good for your bone health, and can really raise your risk of fractures because of compromised balance.
Yeah, when they say excessive, I think they talk about like three drinks or more a day for women, which is a lot, and really that increases the risk for many cancers, metabolic health issues, and often, talking specifically about people with alcohol use disorder, sometimes nutrition is replaced with alcohol. So it's a multi-pronged effect on bone health. And what I'm like you, it's still an occasional celebratory thing, but the more I learn and the more I understand some of the guidelines that come out, that when we talk about the risk for cancer, brain disorders, all kinds of effects of what alcohol can do, what the research overwhelmingly is telling us is there's really no safe amount. So we need to just bring that into our awareness as we make our choices moving forward. And bone health is just one of them. How about soda? I've given up the alcohol. Can I drink my soda?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's better research showing that sodas, especially brown colas that have quite a bit of phosphoric acid, do raise the risk of fracture. So there was the Nurses' Health Study that I believe was in 2014 came out that showed even just 1 or 2 servings of cola a day raises your risk, of hip fracture significantly. So there's multiple reasons.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that drink that and much more.
Yeah, and it doesn't really matter if it's diet or regular. It's the phosphoric acid in the colas that are of concern, and the idea that soda replaces more nutrient-dense beverages, milk, for example. So that's one of the reasons why soda is of real concern in childhood and adolescence, and that's part of the reasons why there's been so much public health advocacy in getting sodas out of the schools, out of the school cafeterias, replacing it with milk, water. That's basically it. So yes, raises your risk of hip fracture. And another study came out not too long after the Nurses' Health Study that compared other carbonated beverages. So thankfully, for people like me who love a sparkling water, our beverages are safe. So that was not implicated in raising the risk of fracture. It's the phosphoric acid in those colas, especially the brown colas.
Especially the brown ones. Yeah, I was going to ask you that too, because a lot of people will ask, well, what about my sparkling water, or the spritzer, all the things that have nice bubbles in them?
Yeah.
Even if they're sugary drinks, that's a whole different category. But if they don't have the phosphoric acid, they're not linked to that danger that you're specifically talking about.
That's right. That's the results from the 2014 Nurses' Health Study, which followed a lot of American women over a long time. And that was their observation.
Okay, great. All right. Are you ready for the myth or fact section?
I was born ready.
Born ready. Okay. I love this first question the most because I'm sure you know how often I get this question. Myth or fact? Osteoporosis is a disorder caused by excess oxalate intake in the diet.
Myth. Very much a myth. Oxalates have gotten a bad reputation because they're called anti-nutrients online, but oxalates they also kind of I feel like they raise the alarm bells. But the science is a bit complicated, but definitely myth. Osteoporosis is not the result of a high oxalate diet. And unless you're following some sort of extreme diet and you're relying solely on spinach and rhubarb for all of your calcium needs, that'd be like some 40 cups of spinach and rhubarb a day, you have no reason to worry about the oxalate content competing for calcium and your bone health.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I've learned from you too. When calcium is adequate, oxalates are really a minimal issue. And so I wanted to share that because people get kind of caught up in the periphery and the noise of that stuff, and I don't like people eliminating potentially healthful foods in their diet as part of a variety of foods that they eat just because it may have an oxalate in it.
Yes.
Okay. Myth or fact? If you eat a high protein diet, you are leaching calcium from your bones.
Another myth, 100%. So all of those studies show that higher protein intake, that's the consensus, that's the expert consensus, that exceeds the RDA. So think about it. They're fighting against the political inertia of the RDA, which was like set in stone for so long, 0.8 grams per kilogram. We all know it by heart. Saying that protein that exceeds the RDA can be beneficial for bone health, reducing the risk of fractures. So 100% myth.
Right. And make sure calcium is adequate.
Calcium is adequate.
Last one, myth or fact. If your blood test shows you have normal calcium levels, that means your dietary intake of calcium is adequate.
Definitely myth. So what the blood tests test for is the transportation. So is your calcium moving appropriately between your gut to your blood to your bone? And if that transportation is good, that's what it measures. It doesn't measure at all how much calcium you're taking in. You have to do that with the legwork of those calcium calculators online, reading your labels, paying attention to your diet, making sure you hit the 1,200 milligrams.
Love it. People often get that confused. I don't think we can say that enough. Your blood test on calcium does not tell you you're getting enough calcium in your diet. Man, this has been so great. What do you want listeners to take away the most from our conversation today?
It's a good question. So when you look at bone health on the whole, there's been it makes sense. There's a lot of tension towards adolescence, towards early adulthood. But we see in the studies is that even with an average age of 86, a nutritional intervention can reduce your risk of hip fracture in a statistically significant way. It's 86, right? So it's not too late. It's never too late. Like your body, just how we started this conversation, your bones are active. They're metabolically active. They're taking in nutrients. They're pushing out nutrients. Like this isn't the bones you had at 16 are never going to be the bones you have again, but that's actually a good thing because they're constantly remodeling it, constantly remaking it. So it's never too late. And it's also not too little. So it doesn't require, I think there's this understandable impulse to say like, okay, I must take care of my bone health in absolutely every way possible. And so there's so many fringe worries and fear and concerns. But we know from a lot of research, from 50 years, 60 years, 100 years, we've been studying this, that what matters most, what those low-hanging fruit is. And it's calcium, exercise. Calcium, exercise. So it's not too little. An extra serving of dairy. You can have one of our chews if you so choose to. It's not too late. You can start when you're 86 and it can still make a really big difference in your later years. It's not too little. It's not too late. Calcium and exercise. I think that's the recipe for bone health, that you can just start now, do as much as you can, and prioritize the things that we know matter. It's calcium and exercise.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's not too late, even for older individuals. And I think that provides a lot of hope to folks. Calcium, exercise, protein. Thank you for your expertise. As a lecturer in food studies, I really think you come to this from an incredibly strong background that kind of gives a lot of credibility. So I really, really appreciate you sharing your time and giving everybody the opportunity to watch this video ad-free. Tell us why your calcium chews at C Nutrition support women and bone health.
Oh, it's my favorite question. So we created Scene because we understood that food matrix effect, right? Like we understood firsthand from all of our research. Dr. Jennifer Hahn, clinical pharmacist, my co-founder, and I understood that. Yet we also understand, practically speaking, it's kind of difficult to eat your 4 servings of dairy a day. And make sure you're getting all the other calcium-rich foods. So what we did was able to isolate the milk mineral complex from milk and then create this we patented a formula that ensured the maximum absorption of that calcium into bone. So you get all the nutritional benefits of milk without the lactose, the fat, the burden of drinking that much milk every single day. And so you get it all in like this one little 10-gram chew, and it's all the nutritional benefits for bone health that milk provides, but in a little shelf-stable treat.
Packaged with vitamin D and vitamin K, so it has the absorption factors that it needs exactly as it is. Thank you. Thank you for what you do to help women through menopause and older to have that high quality of life and avoid fractures as we get older. I really appreciate you, Dr. Adrienne Bitar, for sharing your time with us today.